What is this Biden tax credit or grant or whatever it is? What is it all about and why is it important? Well, if you really want to know, stay tuned because I'm getting into it right now. Hey everybody, Dietric Williams, realtor with Compass in Baldwin Hills, California. Welcome to another edition of Info on the Go, the show where I give tips, tricks, and insight on how to buy, sell, or invest in real estate in Southern California. If that sounds like something that you are interested in, please make sure you hit that subscribe button and ring that bell so you're notified every time I upload new content to YouTube. Now, if you're joining me for the very first time, or not, this is going to be a little bit different show than what I normally give. And I really want to shed some light on some things. So there's a lot of speculation about and confusion about President Biden's tax credit. What exactly is it? Why is it important? Well, allow me to explain what's happening in Washington. So first, Representative Maxine Waters had a discussion draft bill titled the Down Payment Toward Equity Act of 2021. It is targeted to first-time homebuyers, those who will be first generational homebuyers and socially disadvantaged. They can get up to a $25,000 grant to be used toward down payment assistance. Now, this money would come in at the closing table. So once you close on a home, you get those funds. Now, in order to qualify for that, here's the kicker. The borrower's parents could not have owned a home. The caveat being if they owned a home and lost it due to foreclosure or short sale, or the borrowers themselves were part of the foster care system. So if those things applied, you would be eligible to get this grant. Now, the borrower can't earn more than 120% of the area median income for where they live. If it's a high cost area, like here in the Los Angeles metro region, that number jumps up to 180%. Now that qualifies you for the baseline of $20,000. However, if you are socially disadvantaged by being in a group that has been racially or ethnically prejudiced against, that can qualify you for an additional $5,000, and that's where the $25,000 comes in. Now, compare this to President Biden's actual program, which is called the First Time Homebuyer Act. And this one gives a tax credit of 10% or $15,000. And keep in mind, it's a tax credit, so it's not cash that you would get at the closing table. This one's targeted to low and middle class earners as well. However, another clear distinction is that the borrower can't earn more than 160% of the area median income, and the house can exceed 110% of the area median sales price. Clear distinctions between the two. Now, borrowers can claim this credit for homes that they purchase after December 31st of 2020. It would have to be their primary residence, and they have to stay in the house for at least 4 years. So if they sold before the 4 years was up, they could get hit with a tax bill as a way for the government to recover a portion of the tax credit. But the big question is, why is this important right now? And here's the short answer. The home ownership rate between whites and communities of color is extremely large, and it's increasing every year. Historically, communities of color in particular and African American communities specifically have not been afforded the same home ownership opportunities as whites. And that's evident by the establishment of the Fair Housing Administration in 1934. Now, I'm going to use FHA for short. Just know that I'm not talking about loans, because FHA, even though it has a loan program, it is not specifically a loan, it's an entity. So I'm gonna use FHA for short. Don't hate me. So back in the mid-30s, FHA instituted mandates that said that it would not insure homes in or near African American communities. It was a policy known as redlining, and I'm gonna talk about that in a second. Now, while this was going on, FHA was subsidizing builders who were mass producing entire subdivisions for whites with restrictive covenants that none of those parcels could be sold to African Americans. FHA's justification for this was that if African Americans purchase homes in or near those communities, it would drive those property values down and thus would put the loans that they were insuring at risk. Now, there's no empirical and there was no empirical evidence to really justify that, but I'll let you kind of just ponder on that for a second. Now, going back to redlining. So this all stemmed from federal government maps that they had for every major metropolitan area in the country. And where African Americans lived in or near, they would outline those areas in red, hence the term redlining. And it was really to let appraisers know that in those specific areas, it was too risky for them to insure mortgages. So the equity gains that white neighborhoods were seeing, they weren't seeing those in the African American neighborhoods. And this has had a tremendous impact on African American wealth today. In fact, when you look at most middle income families, the majority of their wealth comes from the equity derived in their homes. And since blacks have had unequal footing for home ownership since the 1960s, so at that point, home ownership for African Americans was less than 50%. Today, home ownership for African Americans is less than 50%. So no gains in that. And it's no wonder why that wealth gap is continuing to increase. Now, to be fair, I will say that the government instituted the Fair Housing Act in 1968, which allowed black people to purchase property pretty much wherever they wanted to. But by that time, the damage had been done because those neighborhoods where they wanted to purchase at, they weren't affordable anymore. So fast forwarding to today, and we're seeing issues of racial inequality and wealth inequality. And so when we talk about these two proposals, these two acts, we have to put it into the proper context as to why these things are coming up right now in this very moment of time. Some will argue that it's not fair. Some will say it's leveling the playing field. Some will say, why is the government doing this? They're gonna flood the market with more buyers and we already don't have enough inventory. This is gonna push prices even higher and make the situation worse. And every side has a valid point. Now, I have my own opinions about all of this, and I won't get into that because I don't want to use this as a discussion or as a forum to discuss politics or anything of that nature. Really, what I wanted to do was provide you with some information so that when you're thinking about which way to kind of lean in on these bills and why these things are happening, whether you support them or you don't, you have some information to give you some context as to why these things are coming out, and then base your opinion on fact. So again, I have my opinion, I won't get into it, but please feel free to leave me your opinion in the comment section below. I'd love to have a discussion, maybe have a debate. I don't argue, I'm not very argumentative, but I do like a good fight every now and then. No, I'm kidding, I don't really like to fight.